fulfill the demand of the population, which is a great challenge due to resource and arable land limitations. Even if meat consumption is decreasing in developed countries, its global consumption is increasing because consumers are unwilling to reduce their meat consumptions, particularly in developing countries, such as in China, India, and Russia. Livestock systems will be critical for dealing with food security. They will have to produce much larger amount of high quality, affordable meat. While the modern factory farming model is quite good in terms of space usage and efficiency, it is not sustainable, utilizes many problematic practices, such as huge amounts of antibiotics, and treats the animals under its quote-unquote care as machines. As a result, alternatives are being developed which attempt to solve more modern issues, such as climate change and animal welfare. Among others, this includes cultured meat. We'll get into others as we go, which is represented as a conscious alternative that doesn't require the giving up of meat. The objective of this process is to create the complex structure of animal muscles using only a few cells. A biopsy is taken from a living animal. The objective of this biopsy is mostly focused around the stem cells, which can of course reproduce, but more importantly, can transform into different kinds of cells. Assuming that a main objective of cultured meat is to create cruelty-free meat, there are currently some problems with it. The best medium for growing the animal cells is FBS, which requires the blood of dead cows, which not only slows down the process but leaves the final product as unfit for vegan/vegetarian consumption. Even with this cultured meat made with FBS still requires much less animal cruelty than normal meat. Since much of the appeal of cultured meat is being cruelty-free, cultured meat labs are currently trying to make a plant-based medium, and one that is cheaper as well, in order to make it competitive. All cultured meat startups are looking into plant-based alternatives FBS, but no major progress has been achieved thus far. It is, however, very likely that this will be solved on an industrial scale in the coming years. Once this problem has been solved on an industrial scale, cultured meat would become competitive in terms of production costs and animal ethics. Since cultured meat is produced in a clean environment, the need for antibiotics is much smaller than in normal meat. However, potential contamination would likely require throwing out the product for risk of infection. This will of course require regulation in order to prevent dangerous products reaching shelves. Another problem with hormones and growth factors. Like humans, animals require hormones and similar naturally produced chemicals to grow their tissue. The problem of producing these hormones on an industrial scale hasn't been solved yet. In addition, we aren't entirely sure how long-term exposure to these substances would affect humans. The last main problem with the process of producing cultured meat is that we are still quite far from producing organized muscle tissue and nerves, as they are found in nature, not to talk about replicating the tastes and specialties of specific cuts and breeds. It will probably be quite long before we are able to do such things. All of the points above aren't to say that cultured meat is just as bad as conventional cuts, or that it will not be a viable, responsible alternative in the near future. I'm simply acknowledging the fact that it isn't the magical cure, and we should be aware of this. Now, after we've talked about the practical problems with cultured meat, let's talk about more nuanced and layered problems, such as whether it would count as halal or kosher, and things of that nature, though I don't necessarily mean religious nature. One of the problems is that even if we assume that it produces meat just like in real life, animals provide more services than that. Animals produce milk, eggs, wool, and leather. There isn't a solution currently to this problem. We can, of course, make clothes without using animal products, but the problem of animal byproducts, such as eggs and dairy products, haven't been solved yet. Another problem is price. While cultured meat has taken a steep dive in price, it currently is still much pricier than normal meat, at about 9 times the cost for a ground burger, which due to its nature doesn't require to simulate the complicated structure of meat. In 2013, a single burger made of cultured meat cost about $300,000, which is a massive drop in price. However, there is currently more research needed until it will become competitive price-wise. Otherwise, some authors have demonstrated that consumers tend to strongly reject the name in vitro meat. In addition, the term cultured is much more likable than the terms artificial and lab grown. Studies have concluded that many people tend to perceive it as unnatural. Furthermore, it seems that giving information on how cultured meat is made decreases its likability. This suggests less technical descriptions of cultured meat are favorable. Generally speaking, consumers tend to prefer products that are perceived as natural. From what I understand, cultured meat would count as halal only if it is from an animal that was slaughtered in a way that is considered halal. However, considering that one of the main purposes of cultured meat is avoiding slaughter, this seems redundant. I think it would be hard to find a clear-cut answer in the Quran or Bible, since these texts were written much before cultured meat came around. I must confess, it would be a huge letdown if this held back Muslims and Jews from eating cultured meat. The situation may be different regarding Jews, however, and I quote, "Based on Jewish religious law, when you use a cell from a pig and use it to produce food, the cell loses its original identity and therefore cannot be defined as a forbidden food. It cannot even be defined as meat. Based on this principle, there should not be a restriction on pairing lab-grown meat with dairy." This opinion, by the way, doesn't necessarily represent the whole of the Jewish community, but rather one specific rabbi named Yuval Sherlow. In conclusion, cultured meat as it stands right now isn't the magical cure. It has its upsides and it has its downsides. Based on the research I have read, it seems viable that safe, plant-based, and cheap forms of cultured meat are likely to be commercially available in the next decade. Lastly, some closing remarks. A new study suggests that by 2040, 25% of meat will be plant-based, 35% will be cultured, and only 40% will be conventional meat. This is quite positive for the environment and the animals. This also shows that there is no need for legally banning traditional meat in order to deal with climate change and animal cruelty. My last point isn't a point, but rather an idea. Not an original one, admittedly. Most people believe that desertification is caused by grazing, but this isn't necessarily the case. As per your long explanation, which you can get in the sources, but let's just say that large herbivores such as cows grazing on areas prone to desertification can help trap water within the ground, preventing or even reversing desertification. Maybe in the future we could direct large herbivore populations to areas prone to desertification in order to prevent it from happening there. Thank you so much for tuning in to this video. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe. Have a great day.